So how much income can I take in retirement? Am I taking too much income? Can I take more income? If any of these questions have ever crossed your mind, stay tuned to this week's episode of the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton, here with my good friend and co-host Sarah Samuels, and today we're talking about our favorite topic, and that's income, and how you can determine if you're getting the right amount of income, you're taking too much, maybe not enough, or if you're not retired yet, frankly, how much income you can get in retirement.
Dave, it's great to be here with you and, of course, with all of our brand new listeners as Retirement Income Source is broadcasting on a couple new stations this year. Right. So thank you for joining us and Happy New Year to all of our new listeners out there. But Dave, let's get right into it. Why is income so important in retirement that we've dedicated our show to this topic?
Well, not only our show, but the fact that we have an entire franchise that we established across the country. That's in nearly half the states right now in the continental U.S., lots of franchise offices for the Retirement Income Source right in the Northeast, right? And why is it such a big deal? Well, simple, right? You're a lot younger than me. Okay, that's probably a secret to some of our new listeners. They haven't picked up on that yet, but for you, work, income is simple, right? You go to work, you do a great job at work. I can attest to that. You get your paycheck, you can spend your money, you can save some. Life is good. Then, because you're doing a great job, next year you make even more money. You could do the same thing. Life is easy, right? But when you get to my age, you have to start thinking about retirement. You have to start thinking about, okay, how do I replace that paycheck once I'm no longer working? And here's the reality, Sarah. This reality is that, most advisors don't know how to generate income the right way. And, it's astounding to me because if you go back in the 50s or 60s or early 70s, all financial advisors knew that how you invest money for people who are retired or close to retirement was much different from how you invest during the growth years or the accumulation years. But it seems like over the last 4 decades or so, we've forgotten that and we've lost sight as to how to generate real income.
We want to invite all of our new listeners to send us your Ask Dave question to our new Ask Dave hotline number. The number is 800-822-1111. Please leave us a voicemail with your name and number and your Ask Dave question, and you could receive a free copy of Dave's new book, Retirement Income Source, The Ultimate Guide to Eternal Income. Dave, those transition years are just so important, and we actually have a next question. Our Ask Dave question is all about those years. So this question comes from Gary in Connecticut. He says, Dave, I'm within about 3 years of retirement, but my financial advisor says we don't need to make any changes in my portfolio. I'm a little worried about this strategy.
Gary, I could tell you're a very smart man. You should be just a bit worried. Because again, if you're 3 years out and your advisor is saying that there are not significant changes that have to be made, my best guess, Gary, is that your advisor is using something called a withdrawal strategy to try to engineer income. What do I mean by that? Well, there's an equation, Gary, that's existed in the financial services world forever. And again, in the 50s, 60s, certainly most of the 70s, most financial advisors adhered to this. And it's equation of total return. Total return equals income plus growth, or as I like to say, TR equals I plus G. The income comes from interest or dividends, things that can get paid out to you in retirement, or if you're not retired, you could choose to reinvest to buy more shares. And of course, growth is essentially capital appreciation, where you buy something at one price and it appreciates in value to another price. Well, Gary, early on in your early years, right, when you're working, you're accumulating money, you want total return. You want to make money on your money. You don't care whether it comes from the I or the G, right? You don't care if it comes from income or from growth. You just want your account to go up every year, and it can go up through reinvested income as it can from growth. But now that you're getting close to retirement, all of a sudden it's a whole different deal. Why? Because you can't spend growth, right? Please make no bones about it. You cannot spend growth in retirement. The only way to spend growth is to sell shares and to cross your fingers and toes and hope that it grows back. And my suspicion, Gary, is that your financial advisor has that mindset. He's going to try to engineer income for you by selling shares every year, sending you principal, and hope that he does a good enough job that it grows back. Well, I'm here to tell you, Gary, that hope is not a financial strategy. So if he's not recommending any major shifts, to focus on an income first, growth second approach, focusing on the I first with the G second, then it might be time to shop around, at least interview other advisors.
Gary, thank you so much for calling us and leaving us your Ask Dave question on our Ask Dave hotline. If any of our listeners have a financial retirement question and you would like to hear your question potentially answered on a future show, all you have to do is leave us a voicemail with your phone number, your name, and your Ask Dave question. Just call 800-822-1111. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today we're talking about why income investing is so important, especially in retirement. And Dave, you answered a question
and we're giving away copies of my book to the first few callers.
We are giving away copies of Dave's brand new book. It's the same name as our show, Retirement Income Source, the ultimate guide to eternal income. Again, all you have to do is call us and leave us a voicemail with your name and number, Ask Dave question. And if you're one of our first 5 callers, you will get a free book, Dave's Retirement Income Source book.
Yep. And our listeners are trying to figure out, I probably have a bad memory, right? So I named the radio show and the book the same thing. I'm going to start calling you soon Ms. Retirement Income Source. It'll just make my life easier. I don't have to remember another name.
There you go. Perfect. Retirement Income Source for everything, right?
That's right. That's right. Makes life easy.
Yeah, and it really shows, in my opinion, how important income is, especially for our listeners that are maybe like Gary, our last Ask Dave question. They're a few years out from retirement. Is that when it's really time to make this transition, Dave, in your investments?
It is. If you wait till last minute, you really don't need the interest and dividends, the income, until you retire. But you never know what the market's going to look like at that point. And great example, right now, with an impending Trump presidency, pretty close to half the world thinks that it's going to be the end of the world. I've heard some people, especially in some blue states, saying they're going to become expats or to move to another country, right? And then the other half of the country, or nearly half, thinks that the world's going to be saved and it's all going to be better. Well, the reality is it doesn't matter which camp you're in if you're close to retirement and you're having an income first, growth second approach, because then you don't have to market time. Then the date of your retirement is not dependent upon where the markets are at that particular time. So, I'd like people, Sarah, to think about real estate, okay? You can invest in real estate, and you could do it in a growth way, in a G way, right? You can buy raw land, you can buy properties, you could try to flip properties and make a gain. You're not getting any income from that property. It's all a growth strategy. You're trying to buy it at one price and sell it at a higher price. But what a lot of people do, and a lot of younger people do that, but what a lot of older folks do, people who are in retirement or close to retirement like me, right? I'm going to be 60 this year in 2025, right? So, we're starting to think about that. You have to say, okay, well, if that's where you are, then you need income. So people my age or older tend to buy rental property if they're going to buy real estate. And it doesn't mean that you don't get growth or capital appreciation. You could buy rental property and the property will still potentially go up in value, but you get another benefit. You get those rental checks, you get that you get the income. And that income can be used to spend, to support lifestyle in retirement, or can be used to reinvest to buy more properties down the road. So the bottom line is, no matter what you do, Sarah, you don't have to give up growth or capital appreciation to get income.
Yep. And for all of our new listeners out there, I want to make sure that you're aware that Dave has a new book out. It's Retirement Income Source, the ultimate guide to eternal income. And if you're one of the first 5 callers, the first 5 people to leave a voice message on our Ask Dave hotline, you can receive a free copy of this book. All we need is your name, your phone number, and your Ask Dave question, and you can leave that on our hotline. That's 800-822-1111. Again, that number is 800-822-1111.
And coming up, we're going to talk more about some of the reasons that it was so important for us to actually start a franchise called the Retirement Income Source. Find out what those reasons are and how they affect your hard-earned savings coming up. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.
Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and we are talking about why investing for income is so important, especially for people that are near retirement. And Dave, we talked a little bit about that transition, right? That those 5 to 10 years or so before retirement, when people need to make that transition to investing for income the right way. But if they don't, they may end up getting stuck with using a withdrawal strategy where they're engineering income.
Or they might get stuck postponing retirement, potentially. There's a reason in football why when you get right near the end zone, it's called the red zone. The plays you play in the last few yards before a touchdown are different from the plays you might play at midfield, right? And the same is true here because you don't know what the markets are going to do in right before retirement. So you're rolling the dice, and you might be able to be fortunate and have a market at a pretty high level right before retirement, be able to boom, snap your fingers and switch it over to income first, growth second, and then be able to retire. Or you might get stuck having to work longer because, like you said, the issue with this is that a lot of advisors over the last 40 plus years have really gotten addicted to this growth model, total return, irrespective of whether it comes from the I or G. They just don't even pay attention to it, and they want to get total return, total return, total return. And as a result, people have been programmed that that's the way it should be at all phases of life. But as you know, Sarah, and our longer-term listeners know, that it just doesn't make any sense. As you're close to retirement, you can't spend total return. And more advisors try to engineer income by selling shares. And all they're doing is trying to engineer income from return. They're trying to sell shares and, again, cross their fingers and toes and hope that the money grows back. And again, like we said, hope is not a financial strategy. And there's a whole bunch of different flavors, by the way, about how advisors try to do this, right? As opposed to just letting people spend income, spend interest and dividends, and not touching a dime of principal.
Well, I want to make a very special offer to all of our new listeners out there. We have Dave's book available for free for the first 5 listeners to call and leave us a voicemail on our Ask Dave hotline. All you have to do is call 800-822-1111, leave your name, phone number, and your Ask Dave question, and you will get a copy of Dave's book, Retirement Income Source, the ultimate guide to eternal income. Now, let's get into our Ask Dave question, which comes from Thomas in Delaware, and it has to do, Dave, with working with the right advisor. So Thomas, he called us, he left a message. He says, I'm retired, but my financial advisor is relying on spending one bucket of money first, then another bucket of money later. Is this a good strategy?
All right, Thomas. Well, if you remember just a moment ago, I said that this concept of engineering income through withdrawals and hoping that it grows back takes many different flavors. So for some advisors, it's simply having you in a traditional, we call it 60-40 portfolio, where you're 60% stocks, 40% bonds or bond funds, and you just take systematic withdrawals, and that's backed up with some sort of mathematics called Monte Carlo analysis, which basically says that, hey, 95% of the time, you will not run out of money, providing that you stay within certain limits of how much you can withdraw. The problem with that, though, is that it means that 5 or 10% chance you might just run out of money. So what your advisor has done is maybe a slightly better, different approach of the withdrawal method. What it sounds like he or she's done is this buckets of money approach, where they take 3-4 different buckets over the course of your lifetime. And you spend down one bucket, and then you go to the next bucket, and then you go to the third bucket, and maybe even go to the fourth bucket. And the idea is the longer term buckets have more risk or more volatility. The shorter term buckets are more conservative. But please, don't kid yourself, Tom. No matter what's happening here is they're hoping that those later buckets grow enough to replace what you've spent down in the earlier buckets. So if right now, let's say you're on bucket number 1, the hope is that buckets number 2 and 3 will have enough gain or capital appreciation to make up for what you're spending down in bucket 1. So again, it's a slightly more sophisticated, maybe a slightly sexier withdrawal strategy, but it's still a withdrawal strategy. And like we say every week on the show, the reality is the only way that you can securely get income from your portfolio is if your advisor generates enough interest and dividends, enough income, like that rental income analogy, right? Enough interest and dividends after the fee that advisor charges to satisfy your income needs. Why is that the only secure way? Simple. Because think about it. If you're not touching principal, then let me ask you, can you ever really run out if you're not taking any principal in the first place?
Thomas, thank you so much for leaving us your Ask Dave question on our Ask Dave hotline. And we invite all of our listeners to call 800-822-1111. Leave us your name, your phone number, and your Ask Dave question. And the first 5 callers will be receiving a free copy of Dave's new book, Retirement Income Source, the ultimate guide to eternal income. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today's show is all about why investing for income is so important, especially as you approach those retirement years. So, Dave, we know that investing for income, it's a different strategy, of course, than investing for growth. But why do you think it's so difficult for people to understand this concept of investing for income?
I think there are a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, I think, Sarah, part of it is because for most of people's lives, when from the day they first start, they get their first job, they start saving money, and hopefully it is about the time they get their first job, right? It's all about total return. They don't really care whether the total return comes from income or growth. They just want to see their account balance go up. So that becomes an investor's paradigm for at least the first 30, if not longer, years of their working career. I think the second thing is that we've had pretty strong financial markets. I know we had a period underwater at the beginning of the century, but the 80s and 90s were the best 20 years we've ever seen in the stock market, right? And then after we hit the bottom in 2008 with the financial crisis, the markets have done really well since then. So people, a lot of people using a withdrawal strategy, engineering income from growth, have done okay, but it's not out of skill, it's really just out of luck. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, they've gotten lucky that we haven't seen one of those market drops that we saw in, like you said, the beginning of the century and then in mid 2000s. So that's one of the things about investing for income, though, is that it doesn't matter, right? If the markets are going up or going down, and people really crave that stability in retirement.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because even financial advisors, many times, I'll ask financial advisors about, what's the yield on your portfolio? Now, as a listener, you probably don't know what the word yield means per se, but to an advisor, yield means income, the percentage income, the percentage interest and dividends, the I. And a lot of advisors will say, well, we averaged 14% for our clients last year. And they're not talking about the I, they're talking about total return. So Sarah, it's no wonder that our average investor gets confused, because even a lot of advisors right now have fallen so much into the trap of being total return focused, regardless of the stage of life in which their client exists. And that even when they're asked about the yield they're producing in a portfolio, the income, they're still quoting total return many times.
Absolutely. Well, that's one way to know if you're working with an income specialist or a growth-based financial advisor. But there are a couple other tips so that you can know if you're working with an income specialist, someone that's going to be able to generate income for you the right way in retirement. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today we're talking about income and investing for income, especially as you approach those years before retirement. And we've talked a little bit about why investing for income can be a difficult concept for people to grasp, especially when they've spent the first 30 or so years of their career looking at total return and not really caring about where that total return comes from, which is, of course, income plus growth.
Right, and when you get into retirement, then if you're still total return focused, really your only option in most cases to retire is to start withdrawing shares, start selling shares using the withdrawal method, trying to engineer that income. And we saw just in the last block of the show, Sarah, that there are some things that sound good, like the buckets method, right? Where I'm going to spend down one bucket, then I'm going to go to the second bucket, the third bucket. And a lot of advisors do this because they're so stuck in the box mentally with this total return strategy that they don't even think about the fact that, well, maybe my clients, if they're invested income first, don't have to sell any assets, whether it's buckets or whether it's just across the board. With a withdrawal strategy, all they need to do is generate enough renewable resource, enough income, enough interest and dividends, and that way you never touch principal. And like I said, if you're not touching principal, you can't run out because you're not touching it.
It's sort of like the rental analogy, right? If you buying a house versus renting a house. When you buy the house, hopefully you didn't spend too much on it, and then hopefully when you sell it, you get growth. You sell it for more than you bought it. Whereas if you're renting that house, you know that if you have credit-worthy tenants, you can count on that income each month from your tenants.
That's right. Think of it this way. Capital appreciation, right, or the G in the TR equals I plus G formula, is an unknown source of gain for you. You don't know if it's going to happen or not. You don't know what's going to drive it. But the I, the income, is a known source, right? If you If you buy a property and already has a lease with a creditworthy tenant, you know where that income is going to come from. If you buy an investment with a dividend or interest payment, you know where that's going to come from. So do you want to get your income from a known source or an unknown source? I think the answer is simple.
I think most people would like to get it from a known source. And I think most people would also love to get a copy of Dave's new book for free. That's Retirement Income Source, The Ultimate Guide to Eternal Income. All you have to do is be one of the first 5 callers to our Ask Dave hotline. Leave your name, your number, and your Ask Dave question, and you can receive a free copy. That phone number is 800-822-1111. Again, call our Ask Dave hotline at 800-822-1111. Now let's get into our next question, which comes from Daniel in Rhode Island. Daniel called in and he said, Dave, I'm getting income to pay for my retirement.
First of all, sir, I love this. We have questions from Connecticut, Delaware,
all
and Rhode
over the
Island.
Northeast.
All the places we have retirement income source franchises.
Exactly.
Perfect.
It's great. All of our listeners are keyed into the income message here. So Daniel, again, from Rhode Island, Daniel says, I'm getting income to pay for my retirement, but I'm not sure where that income is actually coming from. So how can I tell?
Daniel, all right, great. And so what does this mean? This means that you may be getting your income from the from the interest and dividends, or you may not. So how can you tell? How can you tell if you're working with a traditional retirement planner who's gotten you to retirement and now is maybe using some form of withdrawal strategy to satisfy your cash flow needs in retirement, or whether you're working with a true income specialist? Well, the first thing I would suggest, and Dan, did you say Dan?
Daniel.
Daniel, thank you. Sorry. Daniel, the first thing is to look at your statement. Many financial statements, if you go over especially to the right-hand column, it says yield or income yield or annualized income or something like that. And that's how you could determine how much interest and dividends your portfolio is actually generating. If it's a percentage, then you need to multiply that percentage times the amount of your account. If it's a dollar amount, then you know exactly how much income, how much interest and dividends that account is generating. And then you subtract from that the fee and that your advisor is charging you. So let's say it's a 1 or 1.5% advisory fee, and voila. Are you spending more or less than that? If you're taking more out of those accounts, then you're taking some out of principal. There's some component of withdrawal method. If you're spending less than that, then you're only spending the renewable source of income. Now, Daniel, what if you don't have that column? What if you just have a statement that shows here's the name of the investment, here's the ticker symbol, here's the initial amount of that in particular investment, and then here's the current value, and there's no annualized income column, there's no percentage column, no yield column. What does that mean? Well, it's not necessarily proof, but it suggests to me there's a very, very high probability that your advisor is using the withdrawal strategy. Why? Because most clearinghouses that print these statements for you have options. Your advisor can either put the income column on the statement or choose to take it off. And if your advisor has chosen to take it off, it probably means it's because your advisor is not generating much in the form of actual income, actual interest and dividends from the portfolio.
Daniel, thank you so much for calling and leaving your voicemail on our Ask Dave hotline. And if any of our listeners would like to submit your retirement question and potentially get a free copy of Dave's new book, Retirement Income Source, The Ultimate Guide to Eternal Income, all you have to do is call our hotline, 800-822-1111. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today we've been talking about investing for income, why it's so important, why so many financial advisors rely on some of these growth-based strategies, and how you can really know if you're working with a true income specialist. And Dave, you gave one great example. If you have that income column potentially on your statements, but what are some other ways that our listeners can know if they're actually working with an income specialist?
Well, if you're within 5 or hopefully 10 years of retirement, that specialist has started to make some major changes in your portfolio, right? We go to our first segment of the show, our first Ask Dave call-in, where there weren't any major changes within 3 years. And that's the first sign that you're not working with an income specialist. Because if they made those changes, they'd be switching you from a total return strategy, irrespective of the source, to an income first, growth second approach. So that's one way of being able to figure out and deduce whether or not you have an income specialist or a retirement planner who perhaps did a great job getting you close to retirement, but might not be best suited to take you through retirement.
Now, what if our listeners are looking for an income specialist? They don't have someone they're working with just yet. Where can they find some of this information, or how can they know if they attend an event maybe that this person actually does income the right way?
Well, that's a great question. And they have to be careful, Sarah, because a lot of people will do workshops and seminars and they'll talk about income, but then all they do is talk about annuities, right? And, that's not necessarily bad. Annuities are kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Some people love them. Some people hate them. They belong with some people. They don't belong with other people. It's like every other financial tool. But if somebody's there touting one product or one strategy, they're probably not an income specialist. The real way to do it is to take that person up on that complimentary meeting and interview that person in that first meeting and say, hey, let me ask you, what's your typical allocation when somebody's retired? How much you usually generate from interest and dividends during their retirement? And what's that equal to net of fees? And ask the tough questions and really interview that person. Don't just hire an advisor that you happen to like or that was referred to you. That may be a good thing or a bad thing, but ask the hard interview questions to make sure that they're truly an income specialist.
And I want to invite all of our new listeners to call into our Ask Dave hotline number. This number is 800-822-1111. Whether you have a question about your retirement, maybe you're looking for an income specialist in the Northeast, our team is here to help you. And if you're one of the first 5 callers to leave your name, your voice message, your phone number, and your Ask Dave question on our hotline, then you can receive a free copy of Dave's book, Retirement Income Source, the ultimate guide to eternal income.
But you know what the most important thing is, Sarah? Most important thing is that you are here with us next week on this very same show, same time, same station. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.